Hi, I'm Shelley Young, owner of the Chopping Block, and today I'm going to teach you how to caramelize onions. You can use any onion you want. It really isn't important. We're just going to use a regular brown onion. A white onion is usually a little bit hotter than this. You could use a sweet onion too, but really isn't necessary. A lot of people think you need a sweet onion because you're caramelizing it. It doesn't really matter. They all have enough sugar in here to caramelize on their own. I'm going to use about 5 onions today. The quantity doesn't matter. You don't need a recipe for this. You can caramelize any number of onions as long as you got a pan big enough to do it. Cut the ends off. Cut the onion in half. Peel it. If you're going to slice a lot of onions, I would do all of this step at the same time. So cut them all in half and peel them. It's faster that way. So I've cut all the onions in half. These onions are, I can see they're not super fresh. I actually had to toss a couple of them. And this one you can see start to separate a little bit here, and it's a little dried up. And that's actually perfect for caramelizing the onions because they're old, so they've got a lot of carbohydrate in there, which is going to caramelize really easily. I don't need to cut these super thin unless that's your choice, but they're mostly water and they're going to shrink up, and that's a really nice size to give you some room to shrink up so they don't just completely disintegrate. So I've got a deep skillet. This is a 3.5 quart capacity, but it's a relatively deep pan. It's cast iron. I chose that because it browns so beautifully. But if you've got a big, deep skillet, that'll work too. A 12-inch would be preferable, but a minimum of a 10-inch. I've got some butter here, unsalted butter. This is hopefully a moderate heat. It might be a little warmer than that, but I'm not too worried about it because these onions, I got a large quantity and they're going to cool it down right away. But I've got about 4 tablespoons of butter here. As you can see, a really large quantity of onions. They may not all fit in here, but that's okay. As they cook down, I'll continue to add more. I don't need to pack this so that otherwise I'll end up just tossing them all over the place. I'm going to turn this heat down a little bit. I want a moderate heat. I'm just going to keep stirring this and sauteing this until they're completely brown and caramelized. That's probably about 30 minutes. Now the caramelized onions are done, and how do I know they're done? Number one, what I look for is a relatively even browning. They're not all perfectly brown. You can see this particular onion is a little more white in the center, but the majority of these onions are relatively brown throughout. I probably could take this a little bit longer if I wanted to. What's also happened through the cooking time was there was a lot of brown in the bottom of the pan. We call that fond, F-O-N-D, and that is there's a lot of flavor in there that contributes to these onions. So if it doesn't come out and into the onions on its own, let them rest a little bit with the heat off, and they'll absorb that. You could also deglaze it with a little bourbon, a little sherry. That's also delicious. All I'm going to add to these is a little salt. Now, a lot of people add sugar, but it really isn't necessary. The onions will caramelize all on their own. So the onions are caramelized and ready to be used as an ingredient. We don't necessarily eat caramelized onions on their own, but they'd be wonderful underneath a beautiful grilled steak. In one of my mom's favorite dishes, which is the caramelized onion and blue cheese tart. She was just here for her 75th birthday, and that's what she wanted. Really delicious with that. You can also add things like bourbon to this, balsamic vinegar at the end, almost pickling or marinating them in that with the balsamic vinegar. That would be great actually tossed in a salad. Great on pizza. I also love it with mushrooms and eggs for vegetarian dishes. Really limitless what you can do with this. You can puree it and use it as a paste. But that is how you caramelize onions.